Hey guys, RanterInShades here, exercising my first amendment rights vlog style, and it's time for another episode of What's Wrong With. It's been a while since I've done one of these videos. It's about time I pick this series back up because there's still a lot of bands that I would really like to talk about, such as the band I'm going to talk about today, which I didn't even know till about a couple years ago is as controversial and touchy of a subject in the metal community as it is. Thus the reason why this band is having a What's Wrong With being done about them. And I think it's only fitting that I wear this pretty tight-fitting shirt in this video. Yep, we're going to talk today about the world-famous, legendary status, heavy thrash metal band known as Metallica. Funny story about this shirt, actually. My grandparents got it for me when they were in China, I think it was, and they didn't even know who Metallica was. They just got it because they thought that I would like the design. And when I saw it, I'm like, holy shit, Metallica. I'm also going to dedicate this video to my good friend Justin Wendelboe, the Metallica guru. So, Metallica were one of the first metal bands that I really remember getting into and enjoying. First song I remember listening to of theirs was Master of Puppets, which is a pretty common first for everybody. If not that, then usually something like One or Battery. One of those, maybe. And yes, Metallica were a band that I've enjoyed very much ever since that day. Now, I'm one of those people that's really only into the first 4 albums of Metallica's, their 80s albums. I don't really care too much for anything that they've done after that. Death Magnetic I do kind of like. I do like a few songs from there. It's not terrible of an album, but it's just, nothing really too memorable, I'd say. But it's definitely far from their worst. My favorite album of Metallica's for the longest time has always been Ride the Lightning, with my favorite song being Fade to Black, off of that album. Then followed by Kill 'Em All, then followed by Master of Puppets, then followed by Justice for All, which actually was the first Metallica album that I ever bought. But yes, those albums are very highly regarded, very well-written, well-executed, well-produced of metal albums that stand the test of time oh so well. Like, unbelievably well. I'm not even being sarcastic there. Now let's go over the musicians, okay? So, and I'm only going by, the 80s era. Okay, so James Hetfield on vocals and guitar. He's got a good voice for the genre. It's very distinctive voice. It really sticks out. Kirk Hammett on lead guitar. Great player. Great shredder. Not exactly my favorite or anybody that I would really consider the best, but he is a great player nonetheless. Cliff Burton on bass. Dude's a legend. Great bass player. And also, I do also appreciate Jason Newsted. Quite so. I also enjoy his work with Flotsam and Jetsam, as well as that solo EP that he released this year. And Rob Trujillo, I do like his work with Suicidal Tendencies and Infectious Grooves, but I don't really listen to him too much with Metallica, but that's not to discredit his work with Metallica. And of course, Lars Ulrich on drums. I do actually think he's a good drummer. A lot of people like to call him sloppy. I unfortunately haven't gotten the opportunity to see Metallica live before, so I can't really follow up on that. But from what I've heard on the albums, he definitely doesn't sound sloppy. And I know sloppy when I hear it, because I'm a drummer and I do have an ear for this. Trust me, I've heard much worse drummers than you could ever say about Lars. Meg White. Anyway, as I was saying before, I really only care for the first 4 albums because of the reasons that I listed earlier. After that, basically what really happened, Metallica was basically toning down a good bit. Not exactly a whole lot of it, to the point where it's not even the same band anymore. They still retained some elements of their sound, but it didn't really do it for me. I don't really have too much to say about a lot of those albums. Load, Reload, Saint Anger. I don't really have a lot to say about those albums, except it's very apparent how different the sound is than what you'd be used to. I feel a lot more strongly about the Black Album, considering it's like Metallica's first #1 success, and that's not the reason why I really don't care for the Black Album, just because it hit #1 and it's so famous and well known, yada yada yada. Nope, not the reason at all. With that album, what I basically took from that album is that Metallica were basically going for a grunge record. The musical landscape was changing. Metallica saw this. They were pretty quick to go with it, and release an album that basically fit the scene, I would say. That's another thing I really like about Metallica, is how they've always been able to stay relevant, even when the mainstream scene was changing. Metallica's style has never exactly been the most popular, but they've always been able to stay relevant somehow. And that is a good transition to debunking the flack, because a lot of people have this to say whenever they're complaining about Metallica, is that they sold out. Just throwing that. Metallica is always the first band, and sometimes the only band, that comes to mind when people think of bands that sold out. Now, yeah, I do see where they're coming from, and to an extent agree with what they're saying. It is very apparent how different the sound is, but not to the point where the records are exactly awful. I don't really care for those albums, but they're far from the worst things that I've heard. They could have been doing so much worse of projects. And a lot of people will also have the fucking nerve to say that they stopped being metal. No! They did not stop being metal. As crappy as those albums were, they were still metal albums. You may not like them, but that doesn't mean that they're not metal albums. Same logic that I always say about hair metal and nu metal. You may not like them, or some of the bands, but that doesn't mean that they're not metal bands. Same with those albums of Metallica's. Even if you may not like them, even if I think that they're pretty crappy, they're still metal albums at the end of the day. But you know what really kills me the most when people are complaining about Metallica, bashing Metallica? They use those albums, those 90s albums, as a means to say that Metallica sucks, or that Metallica has always sucked, and all that. As if that's all Metallica ever did in their career, was release fucking Saint Anger. Nope, that is not all they did. You may think that those 80s albums are overrated. I know some people do, that's their thing, but it's incredibly stupid and idiotic to use an album like Saint Anger to justify hatred for a band that released brilliant albums back in the 80s that stand the test of time, and that they still continue to play at, events and at concerts to this day. Those 90s albums are only a small little fraction of their discography at large. I don't know how often they play a lot of the songs from those albums at concerts. Again, because I've never seen Metallica live, I really want to. But I would believe that their set is predominantly songs from the first 4 albums. The songs that people, for the most part, actually care about, and the ones that will stand the test of time for a longer period of time. Let's also get my opinion about Lulu out of the way. I don't really care for Lulu, but you know what else? I don't consider that album to be a Metallica album. In actuality, that album is more of a side project, a collaborative side project, just a one-time only thing. I don't think we're ever going to see Metallica do anything else with Lou Reed in the future. We're never going to hear any of those songs played at concerts. Unless Metallica are going to be doing a tribute to Lou Reed when he passes on. We may see them play those songs then as just, a little flashback to a moment in time when they were in the studio together. We may see that, but that's not going to probably be for a long time. But anyway, because it's more of a side project, a little collaborative effort, I don't really consider that to be a Metallica album. It basically just stands alone. It's like if this circle right here were Metallica's main discography, Lulu would just be sitting right out here. Just not necessarily part of the group. Sure, it is a pretty significant point in the history of Metallica, but not necessarily part of their main discography. Even as crappy of an album as that was, at the end of the day, Metallica will always stand tall. They will be legends. Their albums will always be standing test of time. You can say they suck, you can say what you will about them, but they'll be standing tall for many years to come. Even in the future, when all four of those guys are dead, we'll still be cranking those tunes up. We'll still be banging our head and raising our horns in the air and shouting into the sky, "Master! Master!" We'll still be doing that. You can't rewrite history and say that Metallica aren't the legends that they are, because that's what they will continue to be at the end of the day. Even with those 90s albums and Saint Anger and Lulu written in those history books, they'll still be standing tall. And that's something I could never disrespect about a band. One last thing I would like to say is, to the people who are still hung up about Metallica's Justice for All losing to Jethro Tull, which I actually have that album right here. Here it is. Yep. My uncle gave it to me for the holidays one year, just, to have it around. Jethro Tull actually is one of his favorite bands, and this is the album. I beat Metallica. Mwahahaha. To anybody who is still complaining about that, just shut up. We get it. Yes, Justice for All is great. We get it. Jethro Tull aren't a metal band. It doesn't take anybody with half a mind to realize that. We get it, so shut the fuck up. We're not stupid. Just thought I would throw that in there in case there are people still complaining about that, which if there are, I would laugh just as hard as I do today about that really troll move. But yes, to sum it up, Metallica will always remain legends, and it took those albums to make them legends, to have their name cemented in stone, to have their name immortalized. And with that said, I'm going to ask you, the viewer, what's wrong with Metallica? Please be rational and objective when leaving your thoughts in the comment section below, and have a great day. I'm Shades, and I'll see you next time.